big topic. Specifically, we're going to talk about how to import layered artwork into After Effects from Photoshop or Illustrator, the main differences between Photoshop and Illustrator artwork in After Effects, and then finally, I'll be animating layered artwork similar to your homework. Yes, that's right. So you can watch how I would handle that. Along the way, I'm going to introduce you to two really important features in After Effects: pre-comps, which are amazingly useful and important, and effects, which are also super fun and really useful and important. To begin with, let me say that so far in this class, I have given you After Effects projects that contain artwork, okay? But in real life, if you've been hired to animate something, your client would give you artwork and you would have to import it yourself into After Effects. So we definitely need to talk about importing. Now, I know this doesn't sound like the sexiest of topics, but actually, it is. It's damn sexy.
It is.
Before we talk about importing, let me just first jump over to Photoshop and show you what some layered artwork looks like there. And I need to explain something very important about myself first. So, you might have noticed that I like wearing ties. Sometimes. But what you didn't know is that I actually have a company that sells ties, and it's called Knowles Neckties. Here's our logo, and this was designed for us by the School of Motion art director, Frank Suarez. So thank you very much, Frank. Now, here we are in Photoshop, okay? And just in case you've never used Photoshop before, we have the layers here, okay? Things are laid out in layers, and here's our art here. Now, just in case this is totally new to you, I should just point out a few things, which is that, for example, the things that are higher up in the layer stack are above things that are below it. Like, for example, my Knowles neckties here, which is here, this layer is up here, and it's above the yellow banner background, which is here. So it displays it above it in the visual order, right? So if I were to take this and move this below, that would now disappear from our view because we can't see through this yellow banner. I'm gonna undo that. Okay, put that back up top. So that hopefully is clear. That's the layer stack order. Something else that I might point out just right here at the beginning is that for this layer up top, for example, it's called the mounting hook. And if I get in really close and we look at it, you can see that it has this like drop shadow here. It's not the easiest thing to see, but you can definitely see it, right? And here I've collapsed that, but that's put on in Photoshop here as a layer style, okay, this drop shadow there. So just keep that in mind, that that has a drop shadow on it. The shirt with the hanger also has that drop kind of shadow on it. You can see it right here. And then the hanger in here also has a slighter, like a lighter colored drop shadow, all right? So just remember that those are layer styles, okay? Okay, so just in terms of building a Photoshop document out for animation, there's probably some other things here that I could point out. The idea is that anything you want to animate separately or animate wants to be on its own layer, okay? I think that's probably pretty obvious, but just to make it clear, so like pretty much when Frank broke this down for me in Photoshop here, he made it the way that he thought things might want to animate, or he wanted to give me the choice of as many things that I might want to animate as possible. So he broke certain things down and did it in certain ways, okay? What we also have here is something like this, the shirt, okay? This is in a group here, okay? So within this like folder structure here, we can twirl this down and we can see that there's like a bunch of other layers in here, okay? Those make up the shirt and the hanger and the tie, etc. This here is actually another group within a group, like a folder within a folder, because that tie has two different pieces. It has the School of Motion logo here, which is this, and then it has the main blue part of the tie, okay? And so I've got all these pieces. And a couple of these things as well, I should point out, are just so that they could potentially change, even if they aren't necessarily going to animate. So for example, we might want to change the color of the shirt, okay? So the shirt then is separate from the stripes. We might want to change the color of those stripes. We might want to change the color of the buttons or of the pocket or of the collar, right? Now, additionally, the collar has a second function, which is to go over the tie, right? So this layer has to go on top of this group here, which contains the tie, because this collar sits on top of that to complete the illusion that the shirt is like an actual 3D thing and that this tag can go under it, right? So, okay, so that's like that. Then we have a type layer here, which, we'll talk about type in a second when we're working on it in After Effects. And then we have like a bunch of layers here. We have these kind of circles for the banner, as well as these banner pieces like the inner and outer stroke there. And we have the banner background. And then we also have two other groups, okay? One that contains the horizontal background stripes. Horizontal, as you recall, is like right and left. And then we have the vertical stripes. So like if I turn everything else off here, we can see that there's this grid of stripes here. Let me pull back a little bit, right? So here in the horizontal group, we have 9 stripes that go along horizontally, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? And then here in the vertical group or folder, we actually have 17 stripes that go across like that vertically, right? So we put these into folders or groups because I just don't want that many extra layers in here, right? This way it's kind of nice and neat and separated from everything else, but can still be animated, okay? All right, whew, I am finally ready to talk about importing. So when it comes to layered artwork, there are actually 3 different ways to import into After Effects. So let me demo this for you. I should say right away that the keyboard shortcut for importing is Command and I. And I should say, first of all, that what I'm really talking about here is importing layered artwork, okay? So when it comes to non-layered artwork, like a photo or a song or a video or something like that, then there's only really one thing that there's only one way that you can import, basically, okay? So like, for example, this JPEG, like I could just select that and hit open, okay? It doesn't give me any options how it imports, okay, right? And by the way, if yours doesn't look like this, you might want to press this Show Options button down here, and then you can see some other options here, okay? So that's fine. So with non-layered art, you just bring it in the normal way. You can even just drag it in from your Finder and stick it here in your project window, okay? But what I'm talking about is layered artwork, okay? Like what we're looking at in Photoshop or something that you made in Illustrator, okay? So when I select this now, which is layered artwork, now you can see that there are 3 different ways that you can import this, okay? We'll go through these all in order. The first one I want to talk about is footage, okay? So when if I select this and I open this, all right, first of all, it's going to give me this kind of fail-safe, like, are you sure? And it's going to give me those options again, like, are you sure that's what you want to do? And yes, in this case, I want to import as footage, right? For example. Now, it's still giving me 2 options here, all right? One is you can import the whole thing, the Knowles neckties, as one layer, one merged layer, okay? Now, sometimes that might be useful, and I'll show you what that looks like in a sec. But also what you can do is just choose one layer from that Photoshop document, which is pretty cool. There's a lot of layers in there. But yeah, just say I wanted one of those, like the banner or background or something. I could just import that way as its own separate layer, right? Which is pretty cool. If I ever wanted to do that, I can just pull in that banner, okay? And there it is. I'm actually gonna delete that, okay? And I'm gonna hit Command I again, right? And I'm gonna find this again, and let me go ahead and import it as footage, right? And show you what it looks like as merged layers, okay? So if I don't choose a layer, but I instead choose merged layers, okay? Now it's up here again. And you can see up here in the project panel that it's a 1920 by 1080 layer, okay? And if I were to drop this into a composition by doing this, boop, now you can see it's right here. It looks just like what I had in Photoshop, except that it's all been collapsed down to one layer, okay? Which is great if I just want this as like a photo or something. But if I want to animate these pieces, of course, this is definitely not the way I want to go, right? Let me go ahead and delete that. And yep, let me hit Command I again, find this again, okay? So now there's these 2 other options that you can import as a composition and retain layer sizes, or you can import as a straight up composition, okay? Now these are similar, but slightly different in a subtle way that's actually really important, all right, to me, and damn sexy.
Are they?
So let me go ahead and hit import as composition first, and I'll show you what that looks like. Boop. All right. And again, fail safe. It's like, are you sure you want to import this as a composition? And I'm like, yes, I am. But now it's also giving me these 2 options here, okay? Layer options. Do I want editable layer styles, or do I want to merge the layer styles into the footage? Now, who remembers what I said earlier about layer styles, okay? Those were things like the drop shadow on the layers in Photoshop, okay? Those are called layer styles, right? So if I want those to be editable, like I want to be able to change them in After Effects, I can just keep this on and they'll be editable. If I want it to just always look exactly like it did in Photoshop and never want to change that, I can check this on. But I have to say that I always want it to be editable because what the heck? Maybe later I'll realize that like I don't like them and I can turn them off or whatever, okay? So in this case, composition, editable layer styles, and I'm gonna hit okay. Cool. Now you can see up here, it has brought a couple of things up into my project panel. Right here, I've got a composition, which by the way, this icon in After Effects, which is like one frame of a film strip, I guess, one frame of film that's got like 3 different shapes. They're tiny, but it looks like a blue circle, green triangle, and red square, I think it is, okay? If you see that icon anywhere, like in the Create New Composition button, okay, that always refers to a composition, okay? So keep that in mind. So as we open this up, we've got all of those layers as well, and you can see that they are Photoshop layers. It's pretty clearly marked, right? Now, as you twirl this down, you can also see that there are some layers that have that composition icon, okay? And those correspond with the things that were groups in Photoshop, all right? We're gonna talk about that more, but those are pre-compositions or pre-comps, and those are really, really important, and I'm introducing you to those in this lesson, and those are gonna be something that I want you to use a bunch, okay? But just teasing them for right now, okay? So the cool thing is now, forget about that for one sec, but just check this out. If I double click on my composition here, right? Now this opens up and looks exactly like it did in Photoshop, okay? And what's really nice is all the layer names are the same, okay? So I can tell at a glance, this is my mounting hook, this is my type layer, et cetera, okay? And these here, like I said, are pre-comps, which is how After Effects handles those groups from Photoshop, all right? So before we get into all that though, I just wanna continue on the idea of importing, right? So what does this mean that we imported this just as a composition, okay? So what this means is if I go up here, let me look at one layer, okay, like my banner background, okay, up here in the project panel in this little window up here, okay? Right now you can see that this is a 1920 by 1080 layer, okay? And even if you look at this thumbnail right now, you can see that it's brought in the entirety of the 1920 by 1080 space, and it's basically all empty space. Like here, if I look at this way, this is that layer in my comp, and if I press this button here, by the way, this is the solo button. If I press this, I can now just look at that banner layer. And if I press this toggle transparency grid button, I can now see that it's actually transparent behind this and not black, okay, unless I have this background layer on, right? So here is that layer, and there's a couple things to notice about it. Let me actually make this like fuchsia, and it'll be a little bit easier to see that the edges of that layer are here at the edges of this comp, right? It really is a 1920 by 1080 layer, just like it says up here in the project panel, right? And that means that, you know, this thing is not that big. It's not 1920 by 1080, this banner. It's just a whole bunch of empty space around it that After Effects has in there because of the way that we imported it, okay? Now, another thing about this is that it puts the anchor point, I'm gonna turn this off now, in the center of the composition, okay? So that's the main thing. When you import as a composition, all of the layers are the size of the composition, okay? Not the size of the layers themselves. And the anchor point is in the center of the composition for that reason, okay? So that's the main difference. So I'm gonna delete this, okay? Yep, delete it. Now let me import this for the third time, and I'm gonna do it as a composition and retain layer sizes. And I should say that, you know, all of these are useful, like I said, but the one that I probably do the most is composition and retain layer sizes basically because it puts the anchor point in the center of the layer. Here, I'll show you, okay? I'm gonna hit retain layer sizes, boop, right? And yep, and I want editable layer styles, hit okay, right? And now here, If I look at that same banner layer again here, right? Now look at the thumbnail, right? And look at this information here. Now it's 800, and it's almost 800 by 150 pixel layer. It's no longer 1920 pixels by 1080 pixels, okay? It's much smaller. It's a lot less information for After Effects to actually even have to think about and calculate, to be honest, right? And if I double click this, it's the same thing. It looks exactly the same as it did before, okay? But this banner layer, now if I make this fuchsia or whatever, you can see that the handles of the layer edges, right, are around the layer itself, okay, with no other space around it, basically. And that means that the anchor point defaults to being in the center in this case, all right? So generally speaking, I find that it's easier and better to have the anchor point in the center of a layer to begin with, okay? So I usually import and retain layer sizes. So yeah, that was a pretty quick review of importing for After Effects, and honestly, it was probably more than you ever wanted to know. But actually, it's all pretty important, so I kind of needed to introduce it as soon as possible. So actually, I need to bring up one other idea about importing in After Effects kind of quickly because it's really important. Which is to say that After Effects projects don't really contain the things that you import, all right? So for instance, if you import a photo into Photoshop and then you save that project, that photo is saved as part of the Photoshop project, right? As a layer. After Effects doesn't quite work the same way, right? After Effects references media, okay, like a photo or a video or a song or layered art, whatever it is, without containing that media, okay? It says that this song or photo or layered art or media, whatever it is, this media is here in a folder, okay, with this name. It knows where it lives and it knows what it's called and it references it in the project, all right? So I know you're kind of like, why do I care about this at all, Noel? And that's a good question. The reason why you care is because if you make art and import it into After Effects, you need to keep that artwork in the same place, right, in the same folder, and keep it with the same name of the file. Otherwise, After Effects is going to get really confused, and that file will show up as missing in After Effects, which can seem really scary when that happens. Now, I'm here to say that if this does happen, it's not the end of the world, okay? You can always reconnect that footage, but just know it's a thing that can happen, okay? So once you import art into After Effects, just go ahead and keep it in that same folder and keep it named the same thing, and you won't have a problem. Okay, so back here in After Effects, let me just show you how I can fix that issue if it happens to you, okay, while I'm here. So for example, if I go back over to my Finder, right, I'm gonna go back over here, and let's take the artwork, and this is actually what I'm working with in After Effects right now. And if I take this and I just put this into a different folder, right, when I go back here to After Effects, yep, I'm getting this error, okay, files could not be found, right? And that's because now it doesn't know where that is because I've moved it to a different folder, all right? So what does that look like? Well, what that looks like is acts kind of strangely, and up here, you can see that all of my layers now have this icon, which is like color bars kind of a thing, right? Yeah, so like, for example, this here, you can see here, this is like full color bars. So if you ever see anything that has color bars like that, I don't know why it's not displaying the color bars here in my viewer, but usually it does, but whatever. When you see color bars like this, you know that you need to reconnect the media, which is what this is called, all right? So basically, if you just find any of these layers, like banner background, okay, and I right-click on this, I can go to Replace Footage and File, right? And then I'll need to find where I just put that, okay, like here, and I'm gonna hit Open, okay? And now it's gonna say 31 additional missing items have been found. Whew, okay. But now it's having some other problem as well. And it looks like some of the layers didn't reconnect, which is a little bit unusual, but what I'm gonna just do is go ahead and select those, okay? I don't know what happened, possibly because I'm working off of a remote drive. I'm going to reload the footage, okay? Now those have come up for whatever reason as missing, okay? So now let me just take one of these buttons, for example, and replace the footage with a file, okay? And then I'll find this again, and I'll hit Open. Yep, and now it's found the rest of my layers. So yeah, if you ever see that your layers are missing and they're displaying those color bars, all it means is that you've accidentally moved the artwork into a different folder, or perhaps you renamed it, Either way, After Effects is just confused and you need to reconnect that media. Okay?
Got it!
Moving on, let's talk about the differences between Photoshop and Illustrator artwork in After Effects. So here are two illustrations. One was made in Photoshop and one was made in Illustrator, right? And I think these are kind of indicative of how I think the styles turn out from Photoshop versus Illustrator, generally speaking, okay? Of course, you can use Photoshop and or Illustrator for lots and lots of things, but generally, when I think of Photoshop art, I think of things that are sort of photo-based and textured, okay? And have like non-necessarily hard edges and things, right? Whereas with Illustrator art, I tend to think that it's kind of clean and generally speaking not textured, though you can apply textures in Illustrator, but it's sort of clean and it's made from like basic shapes and things, right? That's kind of the general style difference between Photoshop and Illustrator. And I think that's kind of like demonstrated here, okay? But, you know, what's probably also fairly obvious is that Photoshop art is pixel-based, right? This is made of pixels, which are like tiny little squares, right, of color. And then, you know, Illustrator is vector-based, which I know that everybody knows, but explaining vectors is always slightly problematic for me because I'm not that mathy, okay? But, and it is kind of mathy. And the way that it works is I believe that vectors are like points and lines that are connected, and basically it remembers the ratio or the relationship between the points and the lines and the sort of Bezier handles and the curves and stuff. And so what that means basically, again, I'm not very mathy, is that Illustrator art can be scaled up, or vector art can be scaled up basically as big as you want, generally speaking. Now, for example, fonts are generally vector-based, okay? Because you need to be able to make them bigger or smaller, but generally bigger and have them stay sharp, right? Logos generally are designed also in Illustrator for this reason, right? And then photos, right? Photos are pixel-based, and so are videos, okay? So Photoshop and After Effects are pixel-based pieces of software. Now, it's also important to note that both Photoshop and After Effects, and in this case, let's just talk about After Effects, but After Effects has its own internal kind of vector system called shape layers. And it's sort of like a little version of Illustrator that you have in After Effects, okay? So you can generate vector layers in After Effects, so keep that in mind as well. Now, the only real difference between Illustrator and Photoshop art in Photoshop has to do with scaling and sizing and stuff. The way that they import, for example, is exactly the same, right? You can import layered artwork from Illustrator as well, just the same exact way you can in Photoshop, right? But the way that they work in terms of sizing is a little bit different, and I need to explain like something else first before we get to this, okay? So here is this layer, which is this, okay, from Photoshop. And as we can see up here in the project panel, this is a 1080 by 1080 layer, right? That's the way I made it in Photoshop. So if I take this and drag this in here, okay, this is a 1920 by 1080 comp, okay? So natively, this is the size of this layer. It's 1080 by 1080, which means it's the same height as this comp that it's in, okay? So it was designed 1080 by 1080 in Photoshop, which means that here in After Effects, if I just move it in here, the way that it'll display the scale is at 100%, okay? This is how After Effects thinks about scale, is the way that an object was made, in this case in Photoshop, okay? Its native size, whenever you bring it in, it defaults as being 100% scale. That's just the way After Effects works. So this 100% in this case refers to 1080 by 1080, but for a different sized layer, the scale at 100% would refer to something else, okay? So scale is like that. And something else about this is that with Photoshop layers, or with photos, or with video, okay, anything that's non-vector basically, you should not scale this up above 100% in After Effects because it will just start to look like really crappy, essentially, okay? The bigger it gets, the crappier it's just gonna look, and you're gonna see the pixels eventually, and it's just gonna show the limitations of the art, and it'll look cheesy, and you'll get fired, okay?
What was that last part?
So that's the thing about Photoshop art, is if you need something to be really big, like if you need this guy to fill the screen here, you need to set it up in Photoshop so that he is this size, okay? Or that photo is this size, right? Because you can't scale photos or Photoshop layers up above 100% in After Effects and have them looking good, all right? I'm gonna delete this now. Now, this is different with Illustrator layers. This is the primary and mostly the only real difference between Illustrator layers and Photoshop layers in After Effects, okay? And that is that you can scale the Illustrator layer up as big as you want and keep it sharp, okay? So the way that I would do this is, so right now this is at 43.7% just to kind of fit it in there, but what I could do is get in here and like type 2000 and make it really big, okay? So now, right now, it obviously looks totally crappy as well, right? But I can fix that by pressing this button right here, okay? This is called the Continuous Rasterization button, which is a mouthful of a name, but if I press this, boop, now you can see that this is perfectly sharp, okay? Check this out. Off, crappy, on, perfectly sharp. No matter how big I make this, this will always stay sharp if I press this Continuous Rasterization button, okay? Now, confusingly, this button has two different names and two different purposes in After Effects. It's also called the Collapse Transformation button, and we'll eventually talk about that as well, but for now, we're just gonna talk about the fact that this button will allow Illustrator layers to stay sharp if they're scaled up above 100%, okay? And note that the Photoshop layer does not have that option to press that. Okay, so that's the main difference, as I pointed out, but I just want to show a couple other things that make Photoshop layers and or Illustrator layers unique in After Effects, okay? So here we go. I just took from this illustration here, if I set this back to 100, okay, I copied this part and imported that separately as its own Illustrator layer, okay? So you can see right here, this is an Illustrator layer. It's got that logo, the Illustrator logo, right? Okay, cool. So right now, if we look at the Properties panel, we can see that the only things I can change about this layer, the only things I can animate essentially are the anchor point, the position, scale, rotation, and opacity, right? And that's good, but if this was a shape layer, I would have a ton more possibilities, okay? So what's cool is After Effects allows you, it can look at this Illustrator layer and see the vectors underneath the surface, okay? And it allows you to convert these vectors into internal After Effects shape layers like these, right? Sort of like those, okay? So if I get in here and I right click on this or control click on this, I can go to Create Shapes, Create, and then in here, Create Shapes from Vector Layer, okay? Boop. And when I do that, now it turns that Illustrator layer off and it makes a layer called, in this case, Layer 1 Outlines, whatever this was called. This just happened to be called Layer 1, okay? Right, and now check it out here in the Properties panel, right? If I select any of these things here, these four groups, okay? And these groups go, by the way, coincide with, Group 1 is this, right? Group 2 is this circle. Group 3 is this circle, and Group 4 is the larger shape here, the bubble, okay? So that's nice and neat, right? And you can always rename those so it's much clearer. But what's even cooler is now I have a ton of animation possibilities that I did not have with the Illustrator layer. Like I could animate the color here of this shape to change to a different color or whatever. That looks weird, but I could also animate, you know, the scale and the position and the anchor point and all those normal things. But I also have things like skew, right? So I could animate that. Or I could choose my pan behind tool, which the shortcut is Y, as you remember, and grab this sort of shape layer anchor point, which is different. This is the anchor point just for this. And now I could just say move this down to the corner. And then again, with this selected, just rotate this, okay? So that's really awesome. And there's no other way to do that otherwise, okay? So yeah, go ahead and try that out. I think that's a really useful thing, okay? So now the final thing that I wanted to talk about was when it comes to Photoshop, okay? So Photoshop works differently than Illustrator, obviously, and you can't just convert these photo layers somehow to like an After Effects shape layer or whatever. That wouldn't make sense. But what you can do is convert Photoshop type in an interesting way here, okay? So right now, this is like some live type in Photoshop, but when I imported it, it's now a regular old layer here in After Effects. So if we look at the Properties panel, I can't like change the type or whatever. It's not live type, right? All I can do is just move the position, scale, rotation, and opacity, right? Which is great, but check this out. If I right click on this or control click on the layer. Again, I can go down to create to this submenu and then convert to editable text. Boop. And then now this is live type, with the same font and everything. And now the properties panel here in After Effects will look exactly like it does for that type layer in Photoshop, right? So for example, since it's now live type, if I decided, okay, this gentleman is in the UK or something, I could always change this now to say more tea was needed or whatever, okay? Which, yeah, hey, that's awesome. And it's just one little nice thing about Photoshop. But what else is cool about this is now that it's live type, I can go ahead, now that I know this is exactly what I wanted to say and I don't want to change that, what I can do is right click on this or control click on this again and go to that same create menu, and now I can create shape layers from that text, right? So again, now this is not editable in terms of changing the words or whatever, but now all these letters are shape layers, are internal After Effects shape layers, which means that I have many more animation possibilities, and it's all nicely laid out here in the project panel. So I can animate things directly this way, and yeah, so that's really nice, because otherwise I couldn't have done that even with live type. Okay, so that's the main differences between Photoshop and Illustrator in After Effects in a nutshell. Which means that we have arrived at the time for me to animate that amazing logo that Frank designed for Noel's neckties. Now, before I begin, I just want to say something kind of important, which is that it's always a very good idea to have a plan in your head for how you want something to animate before you start animating it, right? It's very tempting to just jump in and start making things move around, but that's not the best way to go in my experience. Because when you animate anything, just remember, you are telling a story in time, okay? And just like with any kind of storytelling, you have to reveal the pieces of information at the right time in the correct order so that people can follow you, okay? So for instance, you can't just say every part of the story at the same time. You also shouldn't put like so much time between the facts that people get really bored waiting for the next thing to happen, right? Animation is the exact same. Yeah, so here in After Effects, let's just go ahead and look at this logo. So when I look at this, what I see is three different parts of the design, okay? I see a background, which is these stripes, and I see the shirt with the hanger and the tie, and that's one area, okay? And then I see the banner with the type on it, okay? It's three different things. So basically, the structure of my animation should reflect that, and it should be 1, 2, and then 3, okay? And this is really important. Everything shouldn't happen like at the same time. It should definitely go 1, 2, 3, okay? And in addition, I think I want it to go in the order of like least important to most important, okay? So I would start with the background and build that on, then the shirt and tie and everything, and then the name of the company, okay? The name of the company is generally the most important thing. But something else that's actually really important is that I want there to be overlapping action, okay? It would be really boring, like I was saying, if this goes like 1, and then there's a big pause where nothing happens, and then the second action, and then there's another big pause where nothing happens, and then finally the third thing happens, right? We don't really want pauses or gaps, in between those things happening, right? So we do want to pause though at the end once it's all on screen so that people can read the words and look at the logo. But the way this is going to work is like with overlapping action. So 1 is going to start, the background is going to start animating, and before that's fully done animating, right, then the shirt can start animating, and then before that's fully done animating, the banner and the type can come on, just so there's some overlap. And even though I want those all to feel like 3 different actions, I want them to feel connected, and I want the pacing to feel nice, like one leads right into the next without pauses. Okay, so now I think we are ready to start animating this. All right, actually I lied. I need to go over one more thing before I can start animating. Sorry for the tease, that is my way, okay? But do you remember those groups in Photoshop? So here in After Effects, if we look at them in our main composition, those things that were groups in Photoshop are right here. The shirt with the hanger, the background horizontal stripes, and the background vertical stripes, right? They have this same icon as I pointed out earlier, which means that they are kind of a composition of some sort, right? So you remember in Photoshop that these contained other layers, right? So how do we access those in After Effects? Okay, well, what we do is we double click on the pre-comp, okay, and that opens it up here in a parallel tab next to my timeline here, okay? And here you go. So here it is. If I were just to say like, turn off everything in here except for the tie, right? And I go back over here, we would just see the tie, okay? This updates into here live, right? And it happens in a parallel time, right? So if I go to 15 frames here in my main comp and I double click on this, this will now open at 15 frames in this comp. After Effects does a really good job of trying to keep the timing between these things really easy for you to work with, okay? And basically, pre-comps mean sort of jumping between these different tabbed comps and keeping track of like how the timings all work with one another. And it's slightly confusing for people the first few times that they do it, but I think soon after, pre-comping becomes very, very natural, all right? So I guess the question is why do we want to use pre-comps in After Effects? Okay, why do we do this, right? Well, for one thing, like with these background layers, okay, these stripes, if I just solo those, we can look at just these, right? Right now, as I said in Photoshop, these represent 26 layers, you know, in here. This one has 9 and this one has 17, okay? So that would be like a lot of extra layers. It would like double the amount of layers that we have in here. And we really don't need them to be in here because it's just sort of gonna happen, you know, we're gonna animate each one of them separately, but we can easily just think of it as sort of one thing here. So we collapse these down into pre-comps. It just makes it easier. Other reasons why is sometimes you want things to animate all kind of at the same time or in the same way. Like this shirt with the hanger. We sort of talked about this in Photoshop, but you know, I'm gonna wanna change the anchor point and put it like up here somewhere. Actually, I'll put that precisely here, okay, which is sort of where the bottom of the hanger interacts with this hook here, okay? So now when I rotate this, I want the whole thing to rotate together, right? Like the pocket and all the various pieces, I want those to rotate together. So it's kind of convenient to have all these pieces with one pre-comp here so that I can just animate it together. But I can still go in here and now the tie, for example, is a pre-comp within this pre-comp. I know, mind blowing, but you can have pre-comps and pre-comps and pre-comps, all right? All that means is that the tie is also two different layers, okay? The tie has this logo on it, the School of Motion logo, as well as the regular tie parts. And, oops, if I go back here to my shirt, okay, I want the tie to animate together. I want, when the tie swings, all right, let me move the anchor point to the correct position for this, which would be up here. So when this tie rotates, okay, I want it to be able to rotate independently of the shirt, okay? But with the shirt, because it's connected to the shirt, all right? That's why I have it in this pre-comp as well, right? And then I want this School of Motion logo to also rotate with the tie when that rotates, okay? So rather than having to animate those two things independently, if I have them together in one pre-comp, it's easy to animate this, right? Same with the shirt overall, right? Okay, so that's sort of two pretty obvious things about pre-comps. It just makes it easier to organize things and sometimes animate things, okay? And I'm gonna point this out later on, but sometimes when you're working with effects, which we haven't talked about yet, but which we're gonna talk about later, it's easier to apply the effect once, for example, to a whole bunch of layers, rather than applying it to like 20 layers, you know, independently or whatever, okay? And you'll definitely get used to working with pre-comps. They are really awesome. So in that spirit, I'm gonna go ahead and animate. I'm gonna start with the background, okay? And let me go ahead and just turn this off and jump into my, I'm gonna close this pre-comp and this pre-comp as well, just keep it organized. So now I'm gonna jump into my horizontal background stripes, okay? So here they are and I'm in the pre-comp. And I think I want this animation to happen this way, okay? Again, it's always good to know ahead of time what you want this to do. I want these layers all to come on independently, and I want them to track, I think I'm gonna have them start here at the bottom and move from the right to the left, okay? And I'm gonna also stagger them so that the one on the bottom happens first, and then this one happens second, and so on and so forth, all right? It's gonna have a kind of cascade animation effect to it, all right? So there's actually a few different ways that I could potentially animate this, okay? I could animate this with position and just have this start like over here and then move in over that way, okay? So start fully off screen and then move in to be on screen, okay? Like start over there and come boop, like that. Or, right, I could also use a mask. We've sort of briefly talked about masks, but just to review this again, if I have a layer selected, especially one that's not a shape layer, okay, I could just choose this tool, and now this tool will make a mask, right? So as I select this, you can see that I can mask over this shape, all right? And then in here, if I press M to reveal my mask properties, there's a mask path. And so I could like make a keyframe there, and then I could move in time, or I could actually copy and paste that, and then go back to the beginning, and then I could animate this mask off like that, right? And then it would appear like this is just coming on like that. So I could animate this way as well, but I don't want to do that in this case, right? I want to do the thing that I think is the most elegant, which is to use scale, all right? So we go to like 20 frames. That's how long I want the animation to happen over, okay? And now I want to animate this with scale so that it does that same animation, which means I need to move the anchor point over here, okay? So this is the most, I think, elegant way to go, and I'll explain why in a sec, but means that I have to move the anchor point, okay? We've sort of done this before, but let me just show you this again. I'm gonna choose Y for my pan behind tool, and then I'm just gonna move this over here, and I'm going to hold down on Command and kind of click this into place. Now what I wanna do is get close enough so that I can actually put it here, okay? I want it right there on the edge and in the middle, not here or here, because this is going to scale from this point, so this is actually fairly important. So I'm gonna grab this, and I need to get back far enough to actually see the anchor point, okay? And move this over here, I'm gonna command click and move it there, okay? Do this next one, and I'm gonna put these all over here, and this is fairly tedious to watch, but you're gonna have to do this, okay? So I'm gonna make you watch me do it this time, but maybe not fully on the other side. Looks like I just gotta click that up there, okay? It can be a little bit finicky. Just holding down on Command and moving these all over and making sure it's in the center there, okay? Click. And I feel like I should have like a joke to tell here, but I don't, so you're just gonna have to listen to me. Cool, all right, yeah, I think this is the last one. Yep, and maybe what I'll do is get in closer and just make sure, just double check, it can't hurt, those all went to the right place. Looks like they did, okay, and okay. And by the way, you can just zoom in and out of your window layer by hitting Command, and it feels like the plus and minus that are next to 0 or between 0 and delete, but it's actually the underscore key and the equals key, but I tend to call them plus and minus. Okay, those will move you in and out of your window, or if you have a scroll mouse, I can just like scroll in and out of this. Cool. Anyway, great, I've set those all. So let me widen out, and okay, so I'm here at frame 20, and I'm gonna make a little scale animation now for this one, and I can just copy it to the next, right? And I'm just gonna hit 100, keyframe there, press my stopwatch, obviously, to make the first keyframe, and then I'm gonna unchain this and set this to 0, okay? The reason I think this is more elegant than using position or mask is because of that, because I have a simple animation that goes from 0 to 100, okay? That's very basic. It's not like with position, I'd have to use like some weird position numbers, and with mask, like I would basically have 2 mask points, but those don't have values associated with them, like these numbers, so it just doesn't seem as elegant, okay? So this is the way I'm gonna animate this, and I tend to like that gag where you move the anchor point and animate on scale, all right? So I'm gonna copy this, right? And what I could do is paste that now into all of my layers, just hit paste, okay? And now I'm gonna press U and reveal all of the keyframes, right? So now I just wanna kind of space these out. And by the way, I could turn this off so you can actually see what's happening here. Oh, and it looks like I did not change the anchor point for the top 2 layers somehow. I must have forgotten. So this is useful. I'm gonna move to the end here of the animation, and now I can just move the anchor point even though they're already animated. Don't know how I forgot that, but it's useful to turn that background off to have seen that, okay? And let me grab this and move this over here like that. Okay, cool. So now they should all animate the same way, like this, right? Great. And this feels like a pretty good pace for that. I don't want this too fast, so it's like whipping, or too slow so that it's really boring, all right? So now I just need to make these so that the one on the bottom happens first, okay? So what I'm gonna do is select all the layers except for that, and let me get in closer here. I'm gonna press You can just twirl this to get closer, this sort of little mountain, big mountain thing, or you can press, again, the underscore or equal sign, the one that's next to zero, between 0 and delete, those two keys, which I tend to call plus and minus, okay? So if I get in close, now what I can do is I've deselected this one, and I can just click this back one, all of these, so I just move them one frame, and now deselect this, move this one frame, deselect, one frame, deselect, one frame, etc. Okay, this is fairly tedious to watch somebody do, but again, you will have to do this many times in your After Effects career, I promise you. Okay, let me move this back to one. Okay, cool. So let me just put a work area here, and it looks like this now, right? So that's really fun. Alrighty, so good enough, and if you want, we can go back to our main comp, and now see that all in the main comp, right? Now these layers are a little bit hard to see here in the main comp. It's the way that Frank designed it, and we can actually change that contrast at the end, but for now, I'm just gonna leave it like that, okay? But you can kind of see the animation there. It's a little faint, all right? So let me now go into the vertical pre-comp by double-clicking that, okay? And now I have to do the same thing here. I want these layers all to also start at the bottom, so I'm gonna move the anchor point of all 17 of these to the bottom. Now, I don't want to bore you silly, so I think what I'm going to do, since I'm going to use the exact same method, is I'll show you this once, okay? And then I will fast forward and mercifully spare you how boring this would otherwise be, okay? Select the layer, choose my pan behind tool, and move down with holding down on command, and then I'm going to click it right into the center there, again, like right into the center, not the left or the right, but the center, all right? So I'm going to do this in fast forward for the rest of the layers starting now. Okay, woohoo! So I did that now for all of those, and now let me go ahead and put the animation on as well. Okay, so I'm gonna go to frame 20, and I'm going to press Option S to make my first scale keyframe. Now I can go back to the beginning and unchain this and make this 0, right? So now this would look like this. Oh, whoops. I did this wrong. Oh, okay, that's really instructive. That's why it's impossible to see here. I animated the X instead of the Y. So I want to go ahead and delete that keyframe. Right now it animates like from its own center, like from a thin line. Definitely don't want. Okay. Teacher error, go back, delete that, go back to the beginning, and it's the Y axis that I now want to animate this on, set this to 0, okay, in case that wasn't clear. I want this to move up, okay, not start from its own center and move out and barely be noticeable. That's very easy to mix up X and Y, especially for me. I tend to also mix up my right and left a lot, okay? So I'm gonna copy those two keyframes and I'm going to paste those onto all of the layers, boop, like that, okay? And now let me widen out here and let me just lift this up a little bit so I have more room here in my layer stack down here, okay? And press U. Okay, so I'm gonna do the same thing that I just did where I'm gonna start with this one here, okay? And I'm just gonna move these all up one frame at a time, and I'll get in closer by pressing quote unquote plus sign, all right? And I might do this in fast forward too, starting now. I'm gonna move them over just one frame. Cool, so now it looks like this. Great, okay. And if we look at those together, now we can lower this back down again. Okay, so now it looks like this. Yeah, that's really fun, I think. Yeah, looks really cool. It's very subtle now because the colors are so subtle, but if we were to watch it like without this and with this off, it would be less subtle. It would look kind of like that, right? Sort of a threading action. It's very hypnotic to the eye, all right? I'm gonna put this all back on. Cool. You see how cool those pre-comps are now? Well, hopefully you will eventually learn to love them. Okay, so now I'm done with the background, so let me go ahead and animate the shirt. Let me turn the shirt with hanger on and also turn on this mounting hook because I gotta figure out something to do with that as well. Okay, so for the shirt, I know that in my mind, what I definitely want is an animation with rotation that, you know, does something like this. And what I was kind of hoping to do at the end is have a nice little oscillation where it's sort of like you know, just at a slight angle, and then it like kind of like drifts down to a nice like gentle stop, okay, when it's at, you know, at 0 rotation or something, right? So I kind of want that. So in order to set that up, I think I'll bring this on screen by doing a quick little like scale and then rotation animation to sort of set up that little oscillation, all right? So the way I would do that is I'm gonna go somewhere down here. Remember, I want sort of an overlapping action, so I kind of want this to start before my layers in the background are done drawing themselves on. So, you know, for now, I'm just gonna say that that's right here, but I could put that, you know, anywhere that I want. So let me go ahead and press S to also reveal the scale of this, so I can now see scale and rotation. And let me go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frames or something, and make a scale and rotation keyframe, you know, by pressing the stopwatch, and then go back to 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, this is where I was. And what I want to have happen at the beginning is for this to start out small, but it doesn't have to start at 0. It's going to be moving really quickly, so I could have this start at like 25% of its size or something like that. I can also adjust that later if that's not right. And then I'm going to have it rotate like a bunch this way, like, I don't know, like 35 degrees or something, okay? So it's going to kind of like rotate and scale in really quickly, right? And let me actually trim that layer, Option and left bracket, so that it could start right here, right? So let's just look at that just for timings. Right, okay, so that's fine. We can adjust that. And now I want to do is make that oscillation, okay? So I actually don't want this to stop at 0 here. I want it to rotate, you know, farther past that point, so it can kind of like come back and then sort of swing and sort of like a clock pendulum a little bit, where it eventually just kind of comes down to 0, right? It's called an oscillation. So I started this at like 35, okay? And one thing is that when things rotate clockwise in After Effects, they're rotating positively. When they rotate negatively, I should say, they rotate counterclockwise, okay? So if this is positive, the next one I'm gonna have to have it go to something negative, like, okay, since that was like 35, let me have this rotate to like minus 22 or something like that, all right? So it's now kind of rotating on like that. And I can always like change this and make this bigger at the start if I feel like I need to, right? It's gonna look like that. All right, so now I'm gonna move like 10 frames. And this is actually important. With the rest of the oscillation, the way that I want this to animate is, okay, I want the change to happen regularly, like every 10 frames, but I just want the rotation to get less and less over time, right? You'll see the way this looks, right? So I went 10 frames now, and now I'm gonna set this to like a little bit more than half of this, but positive, okay? So something like, I don't know, 13, right? And I'm gonna go another 10 frames, and now I could set this to like -7, okay? I'll go another 10 frames, and I'll set this to positive like 4, okay? Another 10 frames, -2, okay? Another 10 frames, I'll put this at 1, okay? And finally another 10 frames, and I'll put this at 0, okay? So that's quite a lot of oscillating, but check this out. Now it looks like this. Right? It sort of loses energy over time, okay? It's that kind of an oscillation. It's not like a clock with a pendulum that'll just continuously wag back and forth. It's something that is losing its energy over time, okay? So this is the way I'd animate this. The same period for all the animation, the same timing for the keyframes, but they just get smaller and smaller as they go, okay? And of course, you know, you might want to change this in various ways. I don't think this is like perfect, all right? The speed's a little bit abrupt when it changes right there. So maybe we don't want this to go as far or something. Maybe we want this to go to like -18. Maybe that'll make it more gentle. Yeah, I like that a little bit better, for example. Okay, cool. So let's just say we love that. It's perfect, all right? So I do kind of love that. I don't even have to say that, right? I love it. Now, what's interesting about this is the way that we built this is that the shirt, you know, and all the pieces of it are moving together. But in reality, the tie, which is connected to the shirt, but is able to swing on its own, would have its own kind of like rotation here, okay? So that element is in the pre-comp, all right? So I'm going to have to animate that if I want that to animate in the pre-comp, okay? And what I want to do is remember that there's, like, starting at this frame, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Otávio? Oi,
Fazer uma pausa, uma pausinha?
pode,
Pode
pode,
ser?
pode ser.
Beleza. Vou comer um
Fechou.
negócio e já volto, tá?
Tá, me chama aqui, por
Beleza.
favor. É nóis.
For this oscillation, okay? So if I double click the shirt with hanger, that'll open that layer up and it'll keep me at the exact frame, right? If I go back, this is frame 29, and if I go to my shirt with hanger here, it brought me to frame 29, okay? I've got my tie here, and I've already set the anchor point up here on the top, right? So that means now I can go ahead and Option R to make my first rotation keyframe, right? Now this, I actually want to be something like this, all right? And let's actually just think about this for a sec. As the shirt swings this way, okay, on these first two keyframes, it's turning this way. It's going like that. So I want the tie to kind of be reinforcing that motion because it's part of the same thing that's swinging. So I want it to swing over this way. So at the beginning, which is back, I believe it was 6 frames, if I go back here now, I want the tie to be like over here or whatever, right? Even more so, okay? And these values actually should probably make sense. So it should probably start at just say like 30, okay? And then when it swings down to like minus 25 or something. I don't know. There's quite a lot of force there at the beginning, okay? But now I know if I go 10 frames, there's 6 more oscillations here, okay? So, and they're each 10 frames apart. So I can space this out. So this now goes to, more like 7, 18, okay? And then 10 frames and put that down to minus 10, okay? 10 more frames, and that'll go to 6. Let's see, how many was that? 1, 2, 3. So I'll go 10 more frames, and I'll put this to minus 3. Okay, 10 more frames, and I'll put this at 2. And oops, I think I did too many now. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I need one at 0. Okay, the final one has to be at 0. Okay, so let me make this, instead of 2, I'll make that 1. Okay, and I'll make this negative 2 instead of 3. Okay, and then this one was 6, so I'll make that, so let's see, it goes 10, and then I'll have that go down to 5, and then to 3, and then 2. Okay, so then this tie, let me set the work area here. Boop. Okay, so then the tie oscillation is going to look like that. Okay, that's going to get slower as well, like this. Okay, and if we look at that all together, now it looks like this. Right? And that really adds a bunch of life to it. You can really feel that the tie is additionally rotating. And there's something about it that makes it feel kind of realistic. Now, check this out. So they are definitely like ending at the exact same frame now, but what we could do is offset these keyframes by 1 frame just by moving this 1 frame, okay? And it'll change the way that animation looks. It'll look a little bit looser now. Okay, like it's not quite as connected, right? It sort of has like an interesting quality to it now. Now I will say, you can actually move these like so much, like if I move it like 3 frames or something, that this would, I think, be uninteresting or weird looking at this point, right? Because it doesn't look right. It looks like it has some sort of weird delay to it now, right? But if I undo that, put it back where it was, okay? Now you can see it doesn't look like that just from 1 frame. It's got just a little bit of looseness around it, okay? So overlapping your keyframes sometimes with rotation is like a really good thing to do because it adds like a little bit of extra rubberiness to it or something. It looks like it has weight to it, the tie. Like the shirt starts moving back, but the tie keeps moving in that direction for like 1 extra frame. So it just feels just a little bit nicer. I don't know. It's hard to describe, but that's how I would do that, okay? It's got a little extra waggle to it. Okay, so now that that's done, what I'm gonna do now is animate this hook, okay? This is the thing that's kind of on screen at the beginning now. And I don't want it to be because I want my background to start, but the way that I've built my background is that it's kind of moving from the bottom up, all right? And that's sort of how I wanna animate this as well. I want this hook to start down somewhere, maybe toward the middle, and move up, okay? And I want that to bring our eye sort of from looking at the background and put it right up here, okay? Because that's where my my shirt and tie rather, is going to start animating from, okay? So there's this idea of eye trace, which is basically the idea of like moving the viewer's eye to the right place, okay? So I want to use this hook to move the viewer's eye to where the animation of the shirt is going to happen, okay? To help bridge the gap from the background into this next part of the animation, okay? So I'll get the timings on this right, but right now I'm just going to shove the shirt back a little bit, okay? And I'm just going to do a quick animation on this. And I want this to be a little bit bouncy and fun, so I'm going to put in a little bit of an overshoot, okay? So I'm going to make a position keyframe, Option P to make my first position keyframe, or I could have pressed P and then hit the stopwatch, as you know. And let me jump back like 2 frames, and I'm going to select this, and just move this up a little bit, like that, right? I just use my arrow keys to move it up like 10 pixels. Now I'm going to go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm just gonna drop this down here, somewhere like here. And I just use my arrow keys again, okay? And now I'm going to Option and left bracket to trim the start of my layer right there, okay? So let's just look at that, right? Now that's happening a little bit early, okay? But I like the way the background is moving up and it's sort of pulling you to the center, and then this thing kind of completes that. This little thing finishes it out. And I still think it's happening too early. Okay, but let's check this out again. Yeah, so now you can kind of see it. It moves up with the rest of the stuff, and then that brings you right to where you're looking at the shirt. Okay, we could probably change this shirt so that it happens a little bit earlier. Yeah, maybe move it back a frame or two. I actually didn't mind it having a little bit of a gap. Yeah, okay. So let's just find just the right place for this. This maybe all could happen a little bit earlier, like here, okay? Yeah, but that's really fun. You can see the 1, 2, all right? So we've got sort of the first and second parts of this animated. So now let me go ahead and move on to my banner layer, all right? So, okay, let me turn all these things on, and I'm actually gonna also make these like yellow so I can just sort of tell at a glance that those are all the layers related to my banner. Okay, so how do I want to animate this? Well, these are kind of irregular shapes here. It's sort of a rectangle, but it's got these kind of circles notched out. I don't know. I think I want these to come on kind of fast and also be sort of bouncy. So I'm just gonna animate these also using scale, and I'm also gonna unchain the scale. But I'm not gonna do it from the edges like I've done before. I'm gonna do it from the center, okay? So check this out. Got my banner, and right now, because I imported and retained layer sizes, the anchor point is directly in the center of this layer, and it is for all these banner pieces, okay? Which is really convenient in this case. That's the way I wanted to animate. So, again, I'll figure out the timings, but it's somewhere around here, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and press Option S to make a scale keyframe, or I could have pressed regular S, and then just pressed the stopwatch button to make my first keyframe, okay? And I'm gonna do this quick also with kind of those same timings that I did the mounting hook. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frames. And then for now, I'm just gonna get the timings, the keyframes. I'm just gonna copy and paste that. And then I'm gonna go 1, 2, and paste that again, okay? Right now there's no animation, but I'm gonna Option and left bracket to trim the start of that layer here at the start of the animation. Move in a little closer. Okay, so now I'm gonna unchain this, okay? And I'm gonna start this at 0. And because the anchor point is in the center of frame, it's gonna animate like this, okay? Where it widens out from the center. Let me turn this words off. Let me just solo these 3 things, okay? And the background, right? So this is gonna widen out like that, all right? And that's sort of what I want, right? And then I want it to overshoot, but just a little bit, again, only on the X, so it's gonna go to like 105 or something like that, and then it'll snap back and bounce back into place, okay? So actually, if I turn these other 2 off, this is gonna look like this, all right? Okay, cool, it looks like that. That's pretty nice, right? So what I'm gonna do is now copy these 3 keyframes, these scale keyframes, right? I'm gonna turn these other 2 banner pieces on here, and I'm going to trim those there and then paste, right, those keyframes there as well. Okay, so now they're all together, which is not what I want. That would look like this. Now it just looks like they're all kind of really together. It's not that interesting. It could just be like all one layer or something, right? So how about I'm going to overlap these as well, so they happen in slightly different times. So I'm going to start the exterior one, sorry, this one, the outer stroke. And then I'm going going to select the background, the yellow, and this. I'm just command and clicking, and that's the inside stroke. I'll move these both back 1 frame. Then I'll deselect by command clicking on my yellow background, and I'll move the inner stroke 1 more frame back. Okay, so now it looks like this. Right? It's like the outside one starts first, and then the yellow one, and then the inside one. Okay? Yeah. And the further I separate those, the clearer that will be. Now, I want this to happen pretty fast, but for example, I could move the inside one back 1 frame, and it would look like that. You'd kind of see that a little bit differently. And actually, I think I like that more. So let's see what happens if I move both of them back. Actually, wait, do I want to do that? Let's say I want them to be both 2 frames, okay? So start this again, 1, 2, and I'll put this here, bracket, and then 1, 2, yep, and I want this to be here, okay? So now I've just put 2 frames between those. Yeah, and it looks like that. And I think I like that less. I think I like 2 frames for the second one, and I'm gonna move this back like that, so it's 1 frame for the first one and 2 frames for the second one. For the third one, actually. Gosh, that was confusing. All right, but you get it. Okay, so I've done that animation, right? And now let me unsolo these, all this back off, okay? And I've got these 2 dots here, okay, the circle here, the right and left one. Okay, so let me do a quick animation on this. And I'll probably want to adjust the timings, but once that comes in, so here we go. I've got my left circle. I'm gonna option and left bracket and trim the start of that here. Let me go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frames. Press P, make a position keyframe. Go back to the start of it by pressing I, okay? And I'm just gonna move this down like here to sort of the bottom of this, all right? And I probably don't even need 6 frames for this. Probably 4 frames better. So here's where I'll have it land, and I'll go back to, and now what I'm gonna do is copy and paste this last keyframe there. This is my overshoot, so I'll just jump it up a little bit there like that. I'll use the arrow keys, right? So now that just looks like that. Okay, it's pretty fast. All right, but actually, I think I want this maybe to move down from a little bit lower at the beginning here, okay? And maybe I'll even have it jump up a little bit more in the overshoot like this. Okay, that's just a little bit more fun. Boop. Okay, great. So now what I can do is copy these keyframes, and actually I can't apply that because this is over here, not over here, so they wouldn't have the same keyframes, but I can do this really easily. I probably should have just animated them together. Let me go here to my final keyframe and press Option P to make a position keyframe here, okay? And now I'll go to the overshoot. I think I click this up twice, like that. Okay, and now I'm gonna go back to the beginning and move this down so that it's in the same place. Yep, that looks like it's in the same place. Oh, by the way, that's a good keyboard shortcut. So I had the layer handles on, which made it really hard to see like where this was. So the keyboard shortcut to turn on and off the layer handles is Shift Command and H. And now I can look at that without all that stuff around it and see that it's in the right place. And then I can always put that back on by Shift Command H again, right? Now I'll see the motion path and the handles and stuff, right? So now I've got these which animate together, but in the end I want those to animate at different times. But let me go ahead and animate the type so that I can figure out what those timings are, okay? So the type here, yeah. So I showed you this earlier, and this is awesome. I'm gonna option trim this here, option and, sorry, left bracket to trim the start right here, okay? So now this was a live type layer in Photoshop, okay? But like that thing I showed you earlier, when I imported it, it's no longer live type here, okay? And I don't necessarily want it to be live type because I don't want this to change, but I want to do that thing that I showed you where I convert this to shapes now because I think it would be easier to animate this and it would give me additional animation possibilities, right? So if I right click on this, I can go to the create menu and go to convert to editable text, right? Now that's converted it to editable text, but I don't want to change it because it's not like the name of the store is changing or whatever. What I want to do is right click on this again and go to create again and create shapes from text, right? Now that turns that type layer off and I could like move that to the bottom, Shift Command and left bracket and just like lock that there, right? But now I've got this as an outline here, okay? These are now shape layers, right? So I have additional animation options and I also have in my layer controls, in my properties panel, right? I've got this all, well, you can't see it here, but if I twirl this down here, you can see that I've got all of these letters as individual shapes that I can click on, and those all have animation possibilities in here that I did not have before. Like I could change the individual colors of these letters, etc. Okay, so here we go. I'm gonna do a quick animation just in the properties panel here. All right, so check this out. All right, so let me move like 10 frames, okay? And from my start, and I'm gonna select the N first, all right? So the N has its own, and let me actually lower this so I can make my properties panel a little bit bigger here, okay? So the N and all these shapes have their own individual position properties here, okay? So that means if I make a keyframe for this by clicking on the stopwatch, okay? Now I can animate it here in the properties panel. So if I go back and press I and go back to the in point of my layer, okay? Now I can drop this down this way, right? So this N is now below my banner. Oops. I had caps lock on, so it didn't refresh the screen. But there you go. So now this is down there. It's hard to see because it's blue on blue, but you can see that it's not there, right? And I've got this simple animation here. So let me go ahead and just very quickly, this is just one frame right now. Okay, so let me go like 10 frames, okay, and drop this keyframe back here, okay? And now let me go 2 frames, and I'm gonna copy and paste that keyframe there. Now I'm gonna make a little overshoot by moving this up, okay? I don't want to move this up too much, all right? It's still gotta stay classy here and not be totally cartoony, but now this means I can take these keyframes and copy them, okay? Command C. And now, if I go back to the beginning of the layer here, right? What I can do is select my O here in the properties panel, right? Move 1 frame by pressing page down and paste those keyframes there for the O, okay? So now I'm gonna just do this a bunch of times. Select, page down, paste. Select, page down, paste. Okay, and now you can kind of see here that something's happening, right? Now if I select my layer again, and here, let me twirl this up so this now, I can see stuff in there, all right? Okay, so if I press U, on the layer here, now you can see I've got a ton of keyframes in there for this animation. So now it looks like this. Right? And that's really fun. Woohoo! Now I think that actually looks really slow. So let me take these all and edit these keyframe timings, right? Just in case it's not clear from all the work that we've done so far. If I take keyframes and move them closer to one another, like I'm moving these closer to the beginning, now this animation in here will happen faster, right? And if I take these and spread this out, the animation will happen slower, right? So I move them closer together because I wanted to see the animation happen a little bit faster. Yeah, like that. I think that's more fun. Okay, great. So now I can collapse that down, right? And now let's figure out the timings for these dots. Let me zoom back a little bit. So the shirt, the banner starts to come on here, okay? When the banner's around here, I think I can have that first dot start to come in, right? Like around here, right? Which means that around here, I can have the type start to come on as well, maybe 1 frame after that. And then when the type finishes, like around here, when it's getting finished, now I can have this final dot starting to come in as well, okay? So roughly that would look like this. Okay? Oh, and there's one thing I need to adjust here. Right now, okay, the letters start below the banner, which is not what I want, okay? This is the animation I want, but I get distracted by seeing them kind of move past these banner stripes here. So what I want is to contain this animation within this banner layer here, okay? And there's a couple ways to do this in After Effects. The most basic way is just to use a mask. So that's what I'm gonna show you right now. That's how I would do this. And probably in your homework, that's how you should do that as well, okay? So I'm gonna select this layer. Now, this is a shape layer, okay, because I converted it, right? So when I make a mask, I have to make sure to press this button here so that this tool creates a mask and not another shape layer, which is what would happen if I did this, okay? I think we talked about this one other time. So I want a mask here on my shape layer, so I have to remember to press this little button right here, okay? And now what I could do is just get in here and create a mask so that it contains it within this inner banner, right? So that when it animates now, it looks like this, right? Like it's happening inside of there, and we don't see it moving past these stripes here, okay? Let me zoom back now, and here's a good shortcut. Shift and the slash that's under question mark we'll move the viewing window to the center and try to fill it, right? So let me close this all down. Great. And let's watch it all together and just get the right timings in there. Okay, whoops, let me go back to the beginning, set my work area to the beginning, and actually what I want is once this finishes the type, okay, I want a couple seconds of pause there at the end. So I'm gonna set this just around 4 seconds. Yeah, okay, that's pretty fun. The only thing I would say is in terms of the 3-part action, is that the banner comes on before my eye is done looking at the shirt, all right? So I'm gonna push that back. Okay, here are my banner layers here, all of these, the yellow ones and the blue type. And so where should this stop? Well, here the shirt's kind of stopping and it's getting really slow, but I don't want it to start there. I want it to start as it's kind of slowing down more. So maybe like here or something. Let's see. And again, I want this to have some time after it all writes on. All right, so that's too long, I think now. Split the difference here. Yeah, I think that's closer. So it's like 1, 2, 3. Actually, that could even happen a little bit sooner. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, okay. Right on. I think that guides your eye nicely through it. Like I'm done kind of watching the shirt and then I go down here and look at that, right? I could probably fiddle with these timings for a long time, no pun intended, but I think this is good enough and that'll be up to you to do in your homework. So yeah, let's go ahead and say that this is pretty much done. All right, so we've come to a super fun moment, which is that we're going to apply our very first effect in this class.
Oh, so excited.
Now, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but After Effects has a lot of effects in it. I mean, it's called After Effects after all, so check this out. Okay, so with any of my layers selected, for example, my banner background, if I go up here to Effect, right, now you can see there are just a ton of effects up in here in these various kind of folders. For example, there's a ton of color correct effects here, many of which are similar to Photoshop. You have a bunch of blur effects, right? We have so many effects in here that I actually can't take the time right now to describe them all, but what I want to talk about are generate effects just for 1 second. Specifically, I want to talk about generate fill, okay? But let me just explain that generate effects as a category tend to generate things for you, kind of from whole cloth. For example, if I made a new solid, I could apply advanced lightning and then I would have like a pretty realistic looking lightning beam on there that I could animate, all right? I never do that, but you could. Or you could have a cell pattern that you could, animate and move around. Or it could generate just a straight up checkerboard for you, or a circle, all right? So these effects will generate specific things for you. Generally speaking, you need to apply them to a solid. In this case with fill, I'm going to apply it to my banner background here because I just want to fill this shape in with a color, right? So when I apply this, boop, now it applies it with obnoxious red and fills that whole layer there, right? If I solo this, the whole thing has now been filled red, okay? And I could either animate or just straight up change that color to something else, right? Like just say I wanted to go kind of in a pink direction here, right? I could set it something like this, right? And then great, that's very nice. I love that color. So now that that has been selected, I can go up here and select that again and copy that effect, okay? And then I could apply that to a whole bunch of different things. Like for example, I could get in here and apply it to my background. Now, actually, this probably wouldn't make sense because this is just a solid field of color here. So what I could do instead is make a new solid rather than apply an effect. So I could hit Command Y, and then here I've got this kind of pink color already selected. So let me hit OK. And then I would just drop that down here on top of the background, and I could turn my background off, and I could like lock those both, right? Okay, so cool. So I did that. So just say I wanted to change the tie, okay, to a different color, right? I would get in here to my shirt with hanger pre-comp, okay? And right now I've got this pre-comp with the tie in it. And if I apply a fill effect to this, what'll happen is it will change the color of both the tie and the School of Motion logo. So if I go up here to Effect, okay, and go to Generate and Fill, right, this will now blow over the School of Motion logo and fill the entire pre-comp with red, which I do not want. If I get rid of that, Okay, what I could do is jump in here and apply the effect just to the tie itself and not the logo. Okay, there's actually a really good shortcut to apply the last effect that was applied. It's Shift, Option, Command, and E, or it drops it up here right at the top of the effect window here, right? Cool, so now I can make that whatever color I want. Or here's a good trick actually. If I go back over here to my main comp and I click over here, I could go New and choose a new viewer, right? Check this out. So now it opens two windows, and the keen After Effects observer might notice that this window up here is locked, okay? Whereas this one over here is unlocked. You can see the difference between the icon, locked versus unlocked, okay? So now what that means is if I jump here into my other pre-comp, right, into my tie pre-comp, I can keep this open, the main composition open, because this is locked, so it won't change, right? So now I could use the little eyedropper, go back over here to my main comp, kind of, and eyedrop that color, right? And now you can see that it's updated right here. And if I jump back over to my shirt, I can similarly make changes to this and see how it updates over here, right? So I could grab my shirt, I could apply Shift, Option, Command, and E to put a fill effect on it, right? And then I could get over here and eyedrop, just say down to this, and look at that. That looks really cool. Or maybe it doesn't, I don't know. I'm trying to go fast here. We could do a bunch of stuff. We could take the stripes, right? And we could apply that same generate fill effect, go down here and fill, right? And then like if we don't want the stripes to be red, we could change them to black by eyedropping right here on this black area, right? Okay. So that's generate fill. I think this is pretty obvious. It will take it and fill whatever layer with that color. I'm gonna actually go ahead and now close this down just by pressing that X there. Okay, now if I go back over to my main window, this will open here. Now the last thing I wanted to explain is that a really good use for these pre-comps here, if you recall, there's like 26 layers that are animated in these two pre-comps, right? The reason we collapse those down to pre-comps is just so we wouldn't have 26 extra layers here in our comp, right? But another nice feature of this is I can apply an effect, like my fill effect, and it will apply it to all of these different stripes at the same time, right? So if I go up here and choose fill, now you can see that all of those got filled in, and I can do the thing where I eyedrop here and choose like a better color, right? So it's a little bit more easy to see, okay? And then if I copy this, I can just apply that directly to all of these stripes on the vertical pre-comp by pressing paste, right? And now those all animate and everything stays the same except for the colors have been changed, right? So yeah, that's a really simple use of a generate fill effect to change a whole bunch of colors. Thank you so much. This was really fun. I hope you learned a few things about Photoshop and Illustrator and After Effects, as well as some animation tips to think about and play with in your homework. Speaking of, when you get a moment, go ahead and watch the next exercise video, and I will see you there. Thank you so much.
Bora ver o próximo, então, do exercício?
Vê aí quanto tempo tem, se for muito longo, melhor não.
Ah,
Sono do caralho.
Welcome
12 minutos.
É, você que
Que dá,
sabe.
né?
Dá.
Bora ver.
to another fun exercise video where I go over your homework. Today you're going to be working, very unsurprisingly, on animating a logo that, also unsurprisingly, is a lot like the one that I animated in the lesson. And of course, now that you know about importing, I'm just going to go ahead and give you the Photoshop file and you can bring it into After Effects yourself. So first, let me just jump into Photoshop and show you what I'm talking about. Now, like with the other projects, we've prepared an easy and a hard version for you to work on. And as always, if you have less time, the easy option is your friend. And if you have a little bit more time, you might try the harder option. Either way, you're going to learn the same things, so both options are great. So here's the easy logo, and this is a logo for a shop that sells coffee cups, obviously, and it's called Mugs and Kisses. Aw, that is so cute. And you already know how I feel about coffee. Yep, that's right. And like the Knowles Neckties logo, this also has three main parts, okay? It's got the background part, then it's got the middle part here with the two mugs, and then down here it's got the banner and the name of the shop. The other logo also has three main parts, so I'm looking for you to animate either one with the same general structure that I used, which is that 1, 2, 3 structure, okay? Where there's some small overlap between the sections. 1, 2, 3. Great. Okay, so if we look at the way this is laid out up here in Photoshop, we can see that it's pretty similar to how Noel's neckties was set up, right? The background stripes are here in a group all by themselves. There's 6 of them, right? And then I've got a live type layer here that you could convert eventually to shapes in After Effects so that you can animate it that way. I've also got the banner stroke and the banner. And in these 2 groups, I have the left mug and the right mug. And if we look at these, we can see it's all pretty much laid out just the way you'd expect. One thing that's fun is that we've given you these hearts, which sort of look like lips to me, on a separate layer. Okay, so in After Effects, you can always kind of animate these. Like for example, I could hit Command T. You could like take the anchor point and put it over here, and then unchain the scale and kind of animate them like this to look like they're kind of kissing each other or whatever. Right? That's how I do it in any case. So that's kind of fun. And I think, again, it's up to you to decide this, but I think these 2 mugs kind of look like they're clinking together, like they're toasting, like cheers or whatever, okay? That's, I feel like, what the art implies here. But again, if you can come up with something different that you want to do, feel free to do that. Okay, so now let's look at the hard logo, which is for a store that sells lamps, okay? I actually love this store. I find it really illuminating. Okay, so just like that terrible joke, this logo is more challenging in a few ways, okay? For one, these like lines in the background here, these are curved, okay? So you're not gonna be able to animate them using scale in the same way, and we can go over that in After Effects a little bit. And then we also have this lampshade pre-comp, and I made that a little bit like the shirt, which I animated. So the shade is probably going to want to rotate here to some degree or other, right? But then you've got this chain on here. So if we look into this pre-comp here, or into this group rather, we've got the shade hole, right? And then down here, we've got the lamp pattern and the shade, and then we've got this chain, right? So if the lamp is rotating, I think the chain will also want to swing, kind of like my tie did in relationship to the shirt, all right? And then also you could, again, you don't have to, but theoretically, the reason that you have a pull chain on a lamp, right, is that if this possibly gets pulled down or whatever, right, it might turn the lamp on, and you might be able to do that by changing the color of this element here, potentially, when the chain pulls down. I don't want to say too much, but yeah, I don't know, that's kind of what I'm imagining. One last thing. Just because I love free advertising, if you want to, you can also try animating the Noel's Neckties logo. I don't think it's quite as easy as the Easy Mugs and Kisses one in terms of time, or as difficult as Lamps and Love, but yeah, so if you want a medium option, try Noel's Neckties. All I would ask is that you just animate it differently than the way that I did, okay? Wait a second, did I say one last thing already? Man, I'm such a liar. Because actually, there's really one last thing to do now. Here in After Effects, I really just want to make sure that you're setting up the project correctly before you start animating anything, okay? So when you import, go ahead and, whatever you want. I would probably choose retain layer sizes, but that's a personal choice. Both will work, and it's up to you, so you do whatever suits you the best, okay? Either way, once you import the items, okay, what I want you to do is just open, for example, whichever one you're going to work with, just say Mugs and Kisses, and then go down here into your composition, and I want you to open the composition settings. The shortcut again for that, as you know, is Command K, all right? And let's just make sure that you are working this way, okay? Social media landscape, HD, 1920 by 1080, 30 frames per second, all right? And one other thing is that you just want to make sure that the duration is a good length for you. Like for example, if this is set to like 5 minutes or something, then that would be way too long. I kind of think that 10 seconds is probably a good composition length in this case, because I assume that your animation of the logo and stuff is going to be like 4 to 7 seconds, something like that, okay? So a 10-second composition duration is pretty good for that, right? So let me just get into a few specifics about the individual projects here, okay? So here in Mugs and Kisses, this one's pretty straightforward. I did kind of want to mention one thing, and that's about the trick that I showed about breaking down type. Okay, so with live type layers from Photoshop, they'll open as a Photoshop layer here that's not live, and we don't want this to be live, but we want to convert this to shapes. So I'm going to first right click on this and go to create and convert to editable text, right? Which converts it to editable text as predicted. But then what I'm going to do is also right click on that and go to create and create shapes from text, right? Now I know I did this in the lesson, okay, so this shouldn't be a big surprise to you, but what I want to show you is in the lesson I animated the letters individually, but here we have a lot more letters, so I thought maybe you might want to do that, or what you might want to do is just animate like the word mugs as one thing, the ampersand as one thing, and then the word kisses is one thing. So let me show you kind of how I'd break that down. So for example, if you look here into this shape layer that was just made in the contents, now we have, you know, essentially folders, M-U-G-S, ampersand, etc., mugs and kisses, right? So if I want to break this down into 3 different, you know, words, although ampersand's not a word, but follow with me, I would just take this and duplicate this twice, okay? Right, and then what I'll do is open this top one, get in here into the contents, and see it says mugs here. So now I can just select the ampersand down to the bottom of the S and kisses and delete this, okay? And now I could just rename this as mugs, right? All right, so I think you could see how this is gonna work now. I can get rid of the mugs there and then the kisses there just by selecting those and deleting them. And now I could name this ampersand and so on, okay? I don't need to do this for all 3, but I think you could see how I could do that for kisses. And then after that, I would have, you know, this layer would be mugs, this layer would be the ampersand, and then I'd have a kisses layer. And then I could animate those separately, but as their own whole words. And of course, like I mentioned in Photoshop, you might want to get in here into the pre-comps and animate these hearts to look like they're kissing or whatever. Again, I leave this totally up to you. That is your job, right? So let's just look at lamps and love for 1 second. And again, so this one's definitely going to take a little bit more time. These background stripes, if we get in here, these are actually very hard to see here because they're a low opacity. So what I would do is actually press Command K again, and what you could do is for this comp, you could make like a lighter background color, okay, and set that like that and turn this back on. Now these are a little bit easier to see that way. And remember, that background color that I set is just a reference. This is still transparent back here, okay? In any case, in order to animate these, like if we look at like this one here, okay, just by itself, it's curved, so that scale gag is gonna look weird if I set this over to the end here and then try to like unchain the scale and animate it this way. It's just gonna look rather strange, I think. So the best way to go here, I think, is I'm gonna put the anchor point back in the center. It doesn't really matter. I would probably use a mask on this. So if I choose my rectangle tool, okay, this is not a shape layer. So essentially, I could animate it to look like this by animating the mask path, right? That's how I would animate these. So you'll have to do each one of them by hand separately, okay? Or at least that's what I think, right? Additionally, let's see. Oh, you've got this banner here too, which is slightly more difficult. What I would do is I've already broken the banner down into like left, middle, and right for you. So I think a mask would actually work really well. Just a straight mask, if it just animated across like this, it would look like it's drawing itself on, okay? And then, you know, for this next one, you would just want to like, because of the way this is cut, you would want this mask to sort of move across like this, right? And first kind of pull this on as well as the rest of the banner, right? So I would have all 3 of those animate that way, or that's what I think I would do in any case. And then you can have the words. These are already broken down into 3 words for you in Photoshop, but you can have these animate letter by letter or whatever you want. And then there's the chain thing, which we already talked about, and the heart, etc. And one thing will be figuring out how to bring this lamp on in the first place, so that'll definitely be your challenge. Now remember, whichever one of these that you choose, you know, or even Noel's neckties, if that's the way you want to go, just make sure to use generate and fill to customize the colors the way that you see fit. Just to make it super clear, your homework is to animate one of these 3 logos. If you have less time, try animating the mugs and kisses logo. If you have more time, try animating the lamps and love. And if you want to, or have some kind of intermediate amount of time, try animating Noel's neckties. I want you to have a clear structure here for the animation, which will most likely mean that 1, 2, 3 structure like we discussed. In terms of the pacing, try and find the Goldilocks zone where the three main actions aren't happening too fast or too slow, and there's a small amount of overlap between the sections so they all flow nicely together. Now remember that as an animator, your main task, other than importing the art and then rendering it at the end, is to think of a fun way or fun ways to use the elements that you have to tell a little story in time about the company, okay? Make it your own and make it look good to your own eye if possible. That's what this is really all about, is you developing your own animation eye. Also, it would be great if you have fun with it. And remember, just to leave a few seconds at the end for the logo to be read once everything stops, okay? In total, I think your whole animation might wind up being like between 4 and 7 or 8 seconds somewhere. It's totally up to you in your own eye, okay? Thank you so much, and I really can't wait to see what you make. Bye!
É isso, então.
É isso.
Meu
Ah,
Deus, que treta.
você achou difícil?
Ah, eu achei. Não manjo muito, né? Você deve ter achado mó fácil, né?
Sim, sim. Bom,
É, você manja, né?
aí você vê o que você quer fazer. Se você quer animar isso na quinta, ou se você quer animar amanhã. Aí você que
É,
sabe.
então. Pior que eu não sei, velho, porque eu vou demorar pra caralho pra fazer isso. Ai, e
É
ainda
bom
tem que fazer
você.
aquele outro lá, o anterior, que eu não fiz ainda.
É, então eu acho que é melhor pegar essa semana pra adiantar isso, pra deixar tudo certinho, né?
É, então.
Senão vai começar a acumular as coisas. Aí vai ser
É. Ah,
pior.
mas o foda é que agora esse aí tá mais claro, tá mais recente na mente.
É, então o outro que
Mas
vai ser foda,
beleza.
né?
É, mas beleza.
Mas aí tenta fazer o. Eu lembro que o outro lá tinha uma versão mais pequenininha. Tenta fazer a versão pequenininha dele.
É, não, eu vou fazer a versão menor mesmo. Você fez alguma coisa daquele lá?
Não, nem tô.
Outro?
Desses aí eu nem
Não?
tô fazendo, né?
Ah, tá.
Se eu te falar, eu achei um site de curso, que eu tava procurando uns cursos que eram pagos, né? Aí eu achei um
Aham.
grátis, um site grátis lá. Aí
Sério?
eu baixei papo de uns 49 cursos.
Caraca, velho. Qual site que é?
Deixa eu abrir aqui também. Chama.
Colecionador de curso, né?
Ah, então, só que eu não posso também. Eu baixei só os que eu tava afim, tá ligado? Tem muito,
É,
muito, muito. E eu preciso começar a fazer alguns já, senão eu vou deixar pra. E nunca vou fazer. Chama online-curses.club. Deixa eu copiar aqui.
beleza. Ah, mas tipo, você não tá vendo nenhum do School of Motion? Além
Então,
desse aí?
eu vi. Então, é que eu não quero começar um curso mesmo, né? Porque eu quero,
Ah, tá.
porque o Dani vai querer fazer comigo quando for fazer algo mais avançado, sabe?
Ah, saquei.
Então,
Entendi.
enquanto eu tô fazendo esses cursos com vocês, aí eu tô fazendo a parte outros. Eu,
Ah,
mas eu
saquei.
tô no terceiro, como é que chama? Terceiro workshop.
Aham.
Eu já fiz dois completos, aí eu comecei um, eu acho que ontem, não lembro quando eu comecei, eu tô no domingo, eu acho. Eu tô fazendo esses por enquanto, é rapidinho.
Ah, legal. E desse algum logo você vai fazer aí? Desse de hoje?
Ah, vamos ver, talvez eu anime da minha forma, né, um pouco mais complexa, só pra
Faz
ver
aí,
se,
quero ver,
ver
Tô
se eu aprendo,
curiosa.
ver se eu aprendo algo novo, sei lá. Eu vou tentar fazer
Da hora.
esse de ondinha que ele mostrou o último aí, porque
É, então, da
eu sei
hora, velho.
umas técnicas de fazer como se fosse uma bandeirinha, sabe?
Ah, da hora, velho. Top.
Aí
Beleza,
é bom
então.
que dá uma instigada, né, em vocês.
É, então.
Pra ver uma parada. Fechou.
Aí você pode até explicar como você fez também.
Aham. Demorou.
Beleza?
É
Então tá
nóis.
bom. Falou, até mais. Boa noite, Otávio.
Valeu, Tess. Até mais. Boa
Falou.
noite.